So the last couple of months have been interesting, right? A lot of things have happened in the recent past that we didn't really expect. We just did not see coming. One of the surprising things that's happening right now, but by no means the most surprising, is that lots of people are interacting with digital devices in their homes and other environments just by speaking to them. And that's not really something that we didn't see coming, right? I mean, this has been predicted since the advent of computing. But it's more that it's taken so long to get here, and the technological challenges have been so great. I think some of us were wondering if it would ever happen at all, and if it did, if it would happen in a way that people would really be excited and motivated to use it. So what's changed now? As we all know, innovations in cloud computing, machine learning have got us to the point where natural conversations between people and computers really seem like a reasonable prospect. And not just in a research lab somewhere, but in our own homes, in our everyday lives. Another really important innovation has been the development of far-field microphone technology that allows us to speak to these devices from anywhere in a room. This has really opened up new use cases for us and showed us the benefits of voice in a way that we didn't really see with previous mobile-based assistants. So how many of you, Brian alluded to this, how many of you in the audience have an Alexa device in your home? How many of you among your non-UX, non-tech friends and family, how many of you know somebody who has an Alexa device in their home? And other voice-enabled devices, Google? Yeah, so these devices are now in tens of millions of homes, and because of that, we really have the opportunity to build experiences that can be immediately accessed by users in the spaces in which they spend so much of their time. So does this mean that we've arrived at a place where speech and natural language technology can do everything that we'd want them to? Not really. But we are well beyond the point where unnatural and unsatisfying voice interaction experiences can be justified with the excuse, well, the technology is not there yet. Because at this point, with what we know, with the technology that we have, what we know as user experience professionals, and what we know about human language, really the power is in our hands to develop voice experiences that meet real users' expectation for conversational interaction. So we're going to talk today about how to do that and using a means of doing that you can use right now, which is creating voice skills for Alexa. Phillip will be talking about this more, but just to familiarize those of you who don't know, an Alexa skill specifically refers to a discrete application that would be created by a third party for the Alexa platform that people can build in order to do something that Alexa doesn't do out of the box. So for example, you can order a pizza, you can check your bank balance, you can find out what Donald Trump has tweeted today. We can try that. Alexa, ask President tweets for Donald Trump's latest tweet.
Here's Donald Trump's latest tweet. Since November 8th, Election Day, the stock market has posted $3.2 trillion in gains and consumer confidence is at a 15-year high. Jobs.
Yeah, so that's good news. You can ask, there are skills to get rules for playing board games, find out when your next holiday is. Those kind of skills are single shot, one shot exchanges, ask a question, get the answer. But there are other skills that are more involved. So, for example, Alexa, open The Tonight Show.
Hey guys, Jimmy Fallon here. Just wanted to say a quick hello and welcome you to The Tonight Show.
Thanks, Jimmy. You can play the latest monologue, listen to Jimmy's thank you notes, find out which guests will appear on upcoming episodes, or hear show information. Which would you like?
Thank you notes?
Guys, today is Friday, and that's usually when I catch up on some personal stuff. You know, I check my inbox, I return some emails, and of course I send out thank you notes. And I was
Alexa, stop. I don't know how long that would go. So there are tens of thousands of skills available now, and lots of cool ones like the ones that we just saw or heard. There's some that are maybe not quite as useful or as intuitive. So for example, there's a lot of facts skills. You can learn facts about a lot of things. You can learn facts about cats or parrots or eggs or Lori, somebody named Lori. You can learn facts about Sheboygan, Wisconsin. So Alexa, ask Sheboygan facts for a fact.
Here's your fact. Sheboygan's sister cities are Esslingen am Neckar in Baden-Württemberg, Germany, and Tsubame Niigata, Japan.
So there you go. Clearly, you know, that some of these have a lot of value and the use case is really clear. Others, maybe not so much. So we're really interested in thinking about how to build skills that really do something for users that enhances their lives, and how to build them in ways that is natural for them to interact with. So really this is about delivering on the promise of voice that we've been looking forward to for such a long time. And what is that promise? There's a lot of excitement right now, but what is the value? There's really two ways to look at it. They're related clearly, but it's worth teasing them apart. Some values simply have to do with the fact that we're using our voices and that we are hearing sound, right? It's so easy that you can do it with your hands tied behind your back and with your eyes closed. It's hands-free, no gaze is required. So this really leads to use cases for in the kitchen when your hands are busy, messy. So for example, Alexa, ask cook reference, what's the safe temperature for pork?
The USDA minimum temperature for medium rare pork is 145 degrees Fahrenheit, while medium is 150, and well done is 160.
So, and then others are skills that really trade on the fact that they are using cool sounds or interesting sounds or funny or pleasant sounds. So, Alexa, meow meow.
You have to meow back.
Meow. Alexa, stop. And then on the other side are the promise of voice interaction really has to do not just with sounds and the auditory modality, but with human conversation and the potential for allowing users to interact with devices in the way that's most natural to us as human beings. And there's also a possibility for creating skills or voice experiences that use conversation, that use the back and forth of interaction to maybe get to a solution. Some examples would be those where you engage in a conversation to decide on a wine to serve with your meal, or what you could cook with the things that are in your fridge right now. There's a great one for Johnny Walker that will help you find the right whiskey So I recommend that one. So arguably, we're doing really pretty good at leveraging those skills on the, or that promise and those benefits on the left. There's a lot of potential still in figuring out how we can really utilize what we know about human communication. So also, going beyond use cases, how we design these experiences.
This one should be better.
Okay, is it bad?
Yeah, there's some noise.
Okay, sorry, I didn't realize. So how we design these experiences, also some of the sort of design principles stem directly from the properties of the vocal auditory modality. So sound proceeds in time rather than being laid out in space. It disappears as soon as a word is uttered, so it doesn't persist like content on a screen. There are no visual cues as to what's possible at any given moment. So all of those things mean that order is important. Users can't go back, so they need to be able to easily remember just what just happened in order to know what to do next. There's also no effective way to guard against others in a common space hearing what is going on in a voice interaction. So context becomes really important, and being sensitive to the context in which people will be using these experiences. We can also look at the principles of designing for voice that have to do with patterns and properties of human language. And the designs that use these principles are going to be the most intuitive ones because they're based on interactional knowledge that we all develop in infancy and that we use every day without awareness. As intuitive as they are, because we learn them without really thinking about it and because we aren't aware, they're hard for us to access. So we can draw on what people have learned from studying language and conversation. There's a lot of things we could talk about here. I'm just going to hit 3 big themes real quick that I think are particularly important. So the concept of recipient design is interesting for us because it implies that all human speakers are unconsciously interaction designers. We're all really good at adapting the way that we speak to the person that we're speaking to. So we phrase things differently depending on how much we think people already know about the thing that we're talking about. We phrase things differently depending on who they are. We speak differently to dogs than we speak to children, than we speak to authority figures. And we also tend to adjust our speech to be more similar to the person that we're talking to. This is called accommodation or convergence. And this is a great resource for voice design because it means that we can impact the way that a user will speak to our system by manipulating the way that the system itself speaks. Another big theme has to do with sequential organization. Conversation is not scripted, but it does have a structure, and the basic building blocks of the structure of conversation are adjacency pairs. So they're those pairs that utterances tend to come in. Thank you, you're welcome, greeting followed by a greeting, request followed by acceptance or refusal, a question followed by an answer. This is what we expect, and we also use the structure to make sense of what people say. So if I ask a question, I'm going to tend to think that whatever happens next is an answer. For instance, if I ask my daughter, do you need a ride tonight? And she says, Mom, it's Tuesday. I'm not going to think that she's just randomly changing the subject to talk about the days of the week, but that is supposed to be an answer to my question. I might not know what it means, depending on if I know what happens on Tuesday, which I probably don't, but she thinks I should, obviously. So this pair structure is a resource for design because it allows you to signal to users what type of response is required. But it's also a challenge because it means that a system needs to always interpret what people say, not just on its own, but in terms of what it's responding to. So the biggest challenge with current voice technology is that sometimes it just doesn't get it. Sometimes it just doesn't understand. The thing is that misunderstandings are also really common in human interaction. Ambiguity, indeterminacy are not just technological deficiencies, they're features of human, it's not a bug, they are features of human interaction, and in order to deal with them, we have a robust system for repairing them online as we go along in conversation. So one thing that people do in a misunderstanding is to locate where the trouble is for the person they're talking to, and thereby allow that person to fix it. So for instance, if I say something like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that," you know that I just didn't hear it, right? You need to say the whole thing all over again. But then on the other hand, say I'm ordering bananas, and I say, "I need 10 pounds of bananas." If you say, 10 pounds of what? That tells me you're accepting that I am ordering something and that it's 10 pounds, but you just want to verify that I'm really talking about bananas, right? Or you could say 10 pounds of bananas, and that would tell me that it's the amount that you find problematic and that you need correction for. So this, again, we'll talk more about this, but this is not new to UX design. What is particularly nice about voice design is that we can adopt a system that already exists for helping people fix errors in their conversations. So, yeah, as I just said, it's new, kind of. It's not all new. Designing for voice may be new to a lot of us, but the knowledge that we have already is a resource. So that includes what we know about user experience design already. A great deal of that applies to voice directly. Other elements might not apply directly, but they translate. So for example, concepts from visual design, like color, contrast, line, and shape, can be applied to the design of sequences of talk. And then there's a lot of UX elements that carry over, but really play a larger role in voice design. So for instance, cognitive load, memory, are bigger issues because of the temporal and ephemeral nature of speech. The lack of a visual affordance increases the importance of organization, discoverability, and importantly, using people's real-world language rather than using the terminology of the system. So there's also what we already know about human conversation. And again, we're lucky because a lot of these design problems have already been solved through many, many, many years of evolution and social and cultural development. But they can be hard for us to access consciously because we're often not aware of them. So one possibility is to study what's been learned academically. Another is to try to access what you already know on a subconscious level. So one way of doing that is by listening to others, and this is something that we could do all the time before we even start thinking about how to design for voice. We need to put aside our usual assumptions about what people do and what they mean, and really listen to and observe what's happening. So for instance, we have assumptions about what it means to smile. When do people smile? When they're happy, right? Well, if you actually look at when people smile in interaction, they're not necessarily happy all the time. A lot of the time, it's a way of expressing agreement. It's a way of showing deference. It can be a way of just simply showing that you're not a threat to the person that you're talking to. Those things may or may not be relevant to any skill you might develop, but just an example of sort of things that we think we know that when we look, it works a little bit differently from what we think. And then once you do start actually writing dialogue for voice applications, make sure that you listen to that. Actually read it out loud, read it with others, test it against your own sort of judgments of what's acceptability, what sounds weird, and look at the responses of others. And Phillip's going to talk more about some of those techniques. So now we'd like to talk about how you can put these principles and ideas into practice by developing or designing skills for Alexa. Phillip's gonna take over.
Thanks.
I don't know if you
Siri?
need this.
Am I okay with the lab? Okay. I'm going to say Alexa a lot, so I'm going to turn that and tell her to take a nap. So I'm Phillip, and I want to ask a question. How many of you are designers or UX practitioners of some sort? Okay, almost all of you. Awesome. I have a special message for you in a little bit. How many, has anyone, aside from two people right there, has anyone built a skill? Raise your hand if you've built a skill. So just a couple of you. Awesome. Cool. Well, hopefully what I will tell you today will help you be inspired to go try that. It's super easy, low risk kind of thing that you can try. What Siri and I hope is that between the material that she covered and what I'll talk about, that you get inspired to jump into this world and see what it's all about. I have been doing this for a long time. In fact, those of you who went to James Gingola's talk before this, who's sitting in the back there, he and I worked together at a small design consultancy almost 15 years ago now. My God, it feels crazy to say something like that. We got our starts in the IVR world, which is where a lot of the customer service interactive voice response. It's a place where a lot of speech recognition exploration took place over the past 15 years. It's super exciting now to see where we're going with Alexa and Google and other things that are helping us really broaden way beyond things that we ever explored before. So let's talk about skills in particular. So first of all, skills is our word, Alexa's word, for apps that are made from conversations, basically. So and they're woven into the fabric of Alexa, meaning that you can access them the same way that you access many of the other kinds of things that are available on Alexa. We call them skills for reasons. I can explain it later. But one way we think about it is that you are able to take these capabilities and opportunities and add them to your experience of Alexa. So it's something that you're able to control. So sort of like adding mobile apps to your phone, but in a much more immediate and personal way, because there's an element to both the basic things that are on Alexa and the skills that we hope become part of daily or weekly life. So I want to talk a little bit about what makes a skill. What are the things that the components? So taking all of the wonderful concepts that Siri talked about in terms of human conversation and how we relate meaning to each other, we've tried to break those things into some fairly straightforward concepts that you can apply within Alexa to create those conversations. So the most core element that we have is called an intent. And an intent is the way that we capture a specific request or piece of input. And different things make up an intent, so I'll talk about that in a moment. But if there's one concept that I want you to hold on to, it's this idea of intent. A skill is a collection of those, typically focused around one goal. It could be very simple. The meow meow is a really fun skill. It will probably freak your cat out. So, but it's really fun to watch that. Watch the cat search for the other cats until it gets to the growly part, and then anyway. So then we have other skills that are much more complex, and so, but again, it's really around a goal or a set of goals that are related. Wake word. Wake word is what we say to an Alexa device to start her processing. Right now, there are 4 of those. Computer was the last one that we added recently. So if you don't like saying Alexa or Echo or Amazon, now you can say computer and in your best James T. Kirk voice, and she'll respond to that. You have to set it. Sorry, you have to go change that, but it does work. Launch word. Launch word is a verb that helps us get started with a skill utterance. And so if you see the example across the top, ask Washington State Ferry. So we could do that. I think is this Siri? Is that enabled? Let's see. Alexa, ask Washington State Ferry, when's the next ferry from Edmonds to Kingston?
The next ferry from Edmonds to Kingston is today at 11:10 a.m. in 20 minutes. The ferry after that leaves today at 12:05 p.m. What else can I help you with?
That's it.
You can ask for ferry departure information by saying,
Alexa, stop.
Bon voyage.
That's the skill that Blink put together. It's a super fun skill to play with in this area, in the Seattle area. So open, ask, tell. There's a few others that work for that, and then invocation is in this case it's the Washington State Ferry. You can set that to be different things depending on what kinds of things you want your skill to do. Now, these are sort of the major components. Within an intent, there are several other components that become important. So the prompt is anything that Alexa says to the customer to get them to do something. Typically, the best the best practice is to give them ideas of what they can do. Don't tell them what to say. So instead, give them ideas of what the skill can do for them or what the intents can do for them. An utterance is what the person says back. So in this case, when I said a minute ago about the ferry from Edmonds to Kingston, that's my utterance that the intent is capturing. Slots are variable parts of utterances. So in the case, in what I said, the 2 cities that I mentioned are these slots. Those are things that can change during the course of an interaction. An entity is something that fills that slot. So again, the city in that case is the entity, and then a catalog is something we refer to as a set of entities. So a set of cities, it's typically homogeneous. So how does this all work? So now that you've got these building blocks, you've got these ideas around what might make a good conversation. As designers, as UX practitioners, the nice thing is that you still follow the basic software development lifecycle. There's a discovery and a design phase. You connect and configure, maybe write a little code or connect to some code. You do testing and refining, and then you publish and you see what happens. So this is all stuff that we're all used to, whether you're doing mobile apps or websites or products or whatever. So let's walk through a little bit of this. first I want to set a little context. So we do have an online interface for this. These are 3 screens from that right now. So when you go sign up for an account at developer.amazon.com and you click through to the Alexa Skills Kit, these are some of the screens that you'll see. As the head of UX, I can tell you that we are always thinking of ways to improve this. That's all I can say right now. So we'll talk. Well, you'll see these again. So discover and design. So this is as UX practitioners. This is where you can really leverage all of the skills that you will already have in terms of finding out who, what, why, how, all of those important things that we do when we're designing something. With voice, there's a couple of particular things that you can throw at that or throw into the mix. So basically, the big question is, what do people want to do with voice? Like, what is it that fits? What's the right scenario for that? There are a lot of things that we talk about in terms of conversation, but when it comes to getting something done with Alexa, what we want to focus on, initially at least, is things that are faster, easier, or more fun with voice. So I was just telling a friend here, one of the things I did at Christmas was I bought a smart plug for my Christmas tree so that I didn't have to plug it in and unplug it every day. So I could simply say, Alexa, turn on the Christmas tree. And it was the silliest thing in the world, and the plug was not cheap, but it felt wonderful, right? It was just like, I'm sitting there on my couch, and oh yeah, I want the Christmas tree on. Alexa, turn on the Christmas tree. Okay, bing. It was awesome. Faster, easier, more fun. Low information density. As Siri talked about really well, the speech channel, whether we're talking to someone or whether we're talking to a machine, it's tough for us to communicate a lot of high density information there. And when we do, we tend to, so there's certain things that we're used to over time, like phone numbers. We used to be good at that until we darned smartphones. But there's a lot of things that we're just not good at with dense information. So low information density is really good for speech. And so that's why there's a lot of single shot skills where you just say one thing and it happens and then it's over. Or skills that are built around habits, things that we are used to thinking about. That works really well. And then hands-free and far field. Hands-free has been a big part of speech recognition for a while now, but far field microphone technology is fantastic now. And then, of course, we have the high bandwidth connectivity to the cloud, and that starts to make things really, really powerful and interesting. So look for these situations that help there, that fit these criteria. And start with those. There's always plenty of room to expand later. The next thing to do is look at the flow that makes sense. So conversation, this is one of those things where we can capture from ourselves. Conversation typically has a sequence and a flow where we're comfortable in the way that we're trying to relate something to another person. So when you're designing your skill, design with that in mind. Like what is the flow that makes sense? Don't cram a lot of stuff in. Also, don't make it really interrogative. No one likes to be asked 18 questions in a row. So what is the kind of conversation that feels natural, feels easy to have? What are the invocations and utterances? How do people, what sorts of things might they say to get that conversation started and move it along? And then slots and entities. And then how do you need to manage that dialogue when something hasn't been spoken by the customer that you need to in order to help them progress through their task? How will you raise that? How will you ask them for that? Now, one technique that we've been using for a long time for this is drawn directly from scripting, the practice of scripting for plays and movies. So this is just a random example, hopefully it doesn't say anything embarrassing, that I pulled from the internet about a play. As you can see, it's all typed up, there's dialogue, there's a setting, there's a lot of notes about changes and stuff like that. use this. This is a really, really powerful technique to just imagine the conversation, to look at the wording, to look at the sequence of things. Think about the context. Think about the setting that the person is in. There are some skills where setting does actually play. A physical setting actually plays a part in the experience of the skill. But what you really want to think about is, where is the person using it? Why are they using it? What's likely to have happened right before they started using it? What spurred them to use it, et cetera, et cetera. And then what's the conversation that's going to spring from that? So write it out, play with it, say it out loud, get a friend, pretend to be Alexa, let them pretend to be the customer, back and forth. What feels good? What feels bad? What feels weird? What feels clear? What feels confusing, ambiguous? Make changes based on that, and be ruthless here. I mean, really, you gotta, conversation. We're so good at it with each other that it's hard to actually sometimes remove yourself, like Siri said, step back and say, what makes us good at it, and what kinds of things do I have to build into my skill to help with that? Now, Alexa, we're trying to do a lot of that work for you and give you things that you can take advantage of, but there's still a design element for you to try to take care of. Connect and configure. So basically, there's two key things here. How do you get data? So based on the inputs that they give you, how do you get data, present it back to them? And then if you want to do account linking, which is basically connecting them to using an account that the customer already has and enabling that to connect to the skill, then this is where you do that. This involves a card in the Alexa mobile app. So for example, if you use Lyft, you enable the Lyft skill, and then you sign up. You put your credentials in the Alexa mobile app, and it does the connection, and then everything's connected for you to use that. So that's what this step is about. And then the next super important step is to test. Really work your skill out hard. Push on it. Test a lot of different things. Test unexpected things. Your skill doesn't have to handle everything in the world, but you should feel like it can handle some things that are not necessarily the happy path or the all the expected behaviors. We offer a couple of different ways to test. We certainly encourage you to try it out with other people. So especially naive users, as we all know in our UX practice, that getting naive users in front of something is super important, because they'll think of things that we probably haven't yet. And then again, the ruthless refinement, flow and wording. I'm not going to talk about SSML here, but you can tweak the playback a little bit of how Alexa speaks things, how she where pauses go, and all of this kind of stuff. Information presentation is a big deal. Sequence that Siri mentioned, of just order of things. Like, do you need to confirm something, then present new information? Do you need to present new information? One of the skills that I use a lot presents a lot of information very quickly. It's frustrating, it's useful, so I continue to use it, but it just goes really fast, and I really want it to slow down and give me a little break to have a thought in between the pieces of information. Dialogue, flexibility, and coverage. So this is where people responding with unexpected things can really help you. You can say, oh yeah, I didn't think someone would say it that way, but sure, I need to add that in. And then repair tactics. How will you recover from errors? One of the biggest things about that is a conversation. When we have a conversation with someone, there's always a sense of moving ahead, moving forward. We talk about conversation progressing. We don't typically have conversations that go in reverse. Siri, Alexa, it's all so confusing. Alexa, so conversation with Alexa skills, you want it to feel like it's always moving ahead, even when there's a problem. Don't feel like you're having to screech to a halt and fix something, jump out and repair the tire and jump back in the car and get going. How do you continue moving ahead? Lastly, mechanically, it comes publishing. So we have some rules around certification, similar to mobile apps and things like that. We do some sanity testing for you. Sometimes it can take a little while. We do have a lot of volume going through the system. So we ask for a little bit of patience, but we do support you through this, and we give you feedback. And then lastly, there's a couple of things that we offer that give people the ability to monitor how their skill is doing. And then we have some opportunities around marketing too. So if you feel like you've got a skill that has a broad appeal in some ways, get in touch with us and about that specifically and see if there's some opportunities. We have newsletters that go out every week about Alexa, and we feature skills in them, and we have some other capabilities there as well. So here's that special message. We need more traditionally trained UX designers working on voice design. We need you to add this to your skill set. We need you to learn how Alexa works. Yes, I'll even say we need you to learn how Google Home works. There's a lot of innovation that's going to come in this field. Right now we're still in the what's this thing good for stage in some ways, but at the same time, there's an immense amount of promise, and just the question of what is it good for, I mean, that's what a lot of us are really good at figuring out. So I encourage you to explore this, spend some time, and if it intrigues you at all, I'm going to give you a set of resources to get started with. So there's a couple of older books on here, including one that James co-wrote years ago, which is still, to me, it's still one of the seminal books about the concepts that are contained within how do you make an effective automated speech application. The top book, The Media Equation, is super useful for almost any design framework that you can think of in terms of digital or interactive design, which is really about the emotional reaction we have when something seems quasi-intelligent or human, and we can't really help ourselves. We treat it as a human, mostly because we don't have any other frame of reference. We can't treat things like Martians because we've never met Marshwell. Most of us probably never met a Martian. There's a brand new book, Designing Voice User Interfaces, by someone Kathy Pearl, who's a longtime practitioner in the field as well. I think that's a really great intro to get started. And all of this is just like with any other design practice. You can dive in over the course of a couple of weeks and really start to learn some of the space, and then you can spend the next 10 years becoming an expert in it. So it's a rich set of opportunities, a rich area for innovation and creation. Lastly, there's actually a Voice Interaction Design Association. There's the URL at the bottom. Something I helped co-found about 10 years ago, and so it's a great place to meet other people who have been doing this for a while. They run events, et cetera, you can get involved in. Lastly, if you have the desire to get into voice in a pretty robust way, where you want to start designing and building these things for other companies, we'd be pretty interested in talking to you about helping you get started with that. So you can certainly talk to me. You can also take that email address, Matthew Cadman, who is one of our business development people who works with agencies on this sort of thing. And with that, I think we're a little bit over, so we'll probably have to wrap up. Siri is going to be available at the product showcase. Is that what we're calling it? Project showcase. Product. And I have to go jump on a phone call, but I will be around after 12 for a couple of hours to talk to as well. But with that, we want to thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed it.